Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast from the world of concrete in Las Vegas. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me I have...
Hello, my name is Rhonda Sargent Chambers with RSC Show Productions.
And you just did a talk about women in construction and leaving a legacy, and maybe you could give me sort of the broad strokes of that.
The broad strokes are the reason why I'm here as an entrepreneur and female is that the Women's Association of Concrete Professionals had reached out to me. The connection is that I used to be in the concrete staining and decor with my parents. And then I started my own production company in 2001. So that's why I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, your parents are here.
Yes, they are.
It's pretty cool. And I would imagine, like when I read in your bio, this fashion and production and events, and I bet you're going to tell me there's a lot less not in common than you'd think between these two industries, even though at first blush, concrete and fashion, you wouldn't think those are anywhere close to the same, but I bet you're going to tell me otherwise.
I'm going to tell you otherwise because I do see the parallel. I see the similarities, especially for women who are in here. They're all, some are contractors, some are distributors, some are vendors. They're supplying, for construction sites. But, we all started our company. We all had to learn how to make a business plan. And that's always changing. The parallel that I also see is that we do need to support one another. I explained quite a few times about the similarities in my production work. I started off doing fashion shows and then started going into galas and luncheons and larger. And so they could relate because they saw me building a company. They saw what didn't work for me and what did work. Some younger girls had a lot of great questions. You can tell that they're just starting in their careers.
Yeah, and I noticed a lot of veterans had a lot of great advice. For one, there was somebody asked about imposter syndrome, and well, actually, just to take a step back, I've been in many seminars with all men in them, and you never get that kind of collaboration. It's always guys waiting to see who's going to snipe them, basically.
Right.
And as a male, I understand, but it was really refreshing just to sit there and people go,
refreshing.
Let's solve our problem together. So maybe you could speak to that too.
The collaboration too, like you had just mentioned, is that we realize that supporting one another has far greater reaching, positives for individual. They all had different questions. What was interesting to me is the veterans who had to go through some of this prejudice or discrimination, like my mom did when she first started. She was the only woman. And I think it was good that the veterans could explain to these younger people, but the support that you're getting, this collaborative effort, that was a lot of questions. And I don't usually have that many questions or the time to do so. That makes sense. Yeah.
And your mom also pointed out that things have changed with women because it used to be if a woman rose to the top or close to it, as was possible at the time, no other woman or guys for that matter, let's be honest, would support her, and that has completely changed. Right.
Darned if you do, darned if you don't. She didn't have support from either of the genders. So so it was good lessons. I enjoyed the conversation. I'm surprised that so many people stayed, but they needed one another. That's the collaborative, that they needed that support and confidence. One person had one problem, someone's already had it, and they solved it. And they shared, the information on how to fix it. I liked the back and forth conversations. Yeah.
And another thing that was mentioned was about social media. You mentioned social media and how it allows you to, or anybody in this room who's got a company, to be in control of sort of how they're perceived out there, which of course is a bigger problem for women than it is for men.
It is a bigger problem, and I wanted to voice to them how important it is. Old school, back in the old day, people would sit back, and especially in this industry, construction and such, and keep the same, clients, but never really push themselves out there. Now we have this possibility, this opportunity to be able to be on all platforms. They need to study what information they're getting back. What are people liking? What do people want to hear? What do they want to see? Everything is different in my industry in that respect. If I'm doing a fashion show, they're going to want to see fashion. But they still want to see me styling an outfit. They need to be the face of their company, and I know that's hard for a lot of people.
And the added level of pushback is crappy truth. Women put up with more nonsense on the internet than guys do. So how do they kind of steel themselves for that? Although these are women in the concrete business, I'm pretty sure they're used to dealing with BS and pushing it back.
There were quite a few up here in front in construction. This one woman does construction surveying. So it was a mixed group. I could tell when they first came into the room, coast to coast, one from Canada. So it was good diversity in the room for them to help one another. Yeah.
And do you have any advice for them, just when there's an onslaught of dumbness, for lack of a better term, on social media or in the workplace? If some guys, it was cited that a guy comes in and immediately talks to the other guy in the room, no matter how junior he might be. How do you deal with that without pushing a client away, or do you want to push a client away sometimes?
I have fired a client before, because I don't need that.
Right.
I'm spending too much energy with someone who is combative with everyone, not just me.
Right.
My team doesn't need that. My crew doesn't need that energy sucked out of their life. And I have let go of a client before because it was just too much. But the one thing too about the gender thing, I think that it's good for them to understand that being confident and trusting that you are the expert in your field, there's going to be something we don't know.
Right.
But to show the confidence and stand up to people, it's easier for me to say it at my age than it is for that young girl who's, having issues, for her to stand up to someone. They haven't learned yet, that they can brush it aside, brush it off, and move on. I can do that now, and that doesn't necessarily come with age. I've known some younger people that can do that just very well.
Yeah. Another thing, whenever I've gone to women in construction sessions, one of the things that always comes up is, we've hired more women, but they don't stay that long, and it boils down to culture, really. It's like it's just not a pleasant place to be. So, have you seen that change, even in your own industry or otherwise?
I'm not going to call out any generations, but
well, go ahead.
I lose,
including Gen X. I mean, both of us are Gen X. So
you said that, not me. I in my industry, it's a lot of work. It's beautiful on the event day, and everyone's sitting eating their luncheons and they're having a great time. They don't know how many months it took to prepare them. They don't know that 2 days prior we schlepped in these huge boxes. We put up the rig and we put up all this. They don't understand how much work is involved. I do lose interns after maybe after an event because they didn't realize how physical it was, and it's physical. Now, there's another parallel with my industry.
Right, of course, yeah.
And because I'm in production, it looks pretty on the outside. Now look at their jobs. It's a hard job.
Yeah.
It really is a hard job. And a lot of work, a lot of schlepping, especially when they're actually, you have concrete pours, and then you've got the, scoring, and you've got the etching and the decor, and then you've got the stain. I mean, it's a physical job.
And you said with interns, and I assume this probably applies to construction as well, get them in to do the tough stuff first, because I got to learn that right away. That it's not glamorous.
I said that. I want them to be there when it's not pretty. I want them to see all these stages until it's on stage and pretty. And then we break everything down. Now there comes the schlepping again.
Yeah,
breakdown, and it's
after
not
everybody's
whatever
left.
People think that it is actually.
Okay, well, if you have a final piece of advice for women in construction in Canada or at the States, for that matter, what would it be?
Old school, new school. Do everything that your parents could have done. Now implement that with all of these tools that you have. Social media and communication and the networking events that they have. Back then we didn't have that, and but apply the old school handwritten notes to say thank you, pounding the pavement, leaving your maybe a press kit or something with a construction company. We still need to do all of those things. A lot of these people don't even put a business plan together when they get started. They think about it later if they start growing or things aren't going well, but they need to implement that plan at the very beginning. The other thing, I don't know if you heard, but I do think these inspiration boards, and it doesn't have to be the old style where you're cutting out pictures of magazines.
Right.
But really,
if you can find a magazine.
Yeah, if you can find a magazine, right. Go into making your own graphic, and what do you want your company to look like? We should be thinking about 25, but I want them to think about it now because I could tell a lot of them hadn't started thinking about where's their company going. But also, on the other hand, make a personal board. Let the two join and meet eventually. Let them balance themselves out together.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
We're here at World of Concrete with
Kaneshka Salehi.
And we just walked out of a 3D printing forum where a bunch of different topics about 3D printing were discussed. You're an architect, and you kind of came from that angle about it. First, I'd like to talk about what you said about how you're an artist and you like to draw, and this is sort of I don't know if I'd term it the best way, but your favorite way, I guess.
Yes.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I come across 3D printing. I think it opened up my world in terms of what I've been struggling to build for many, many years, because the standard construction methods and also materials are not suitable for it.
Mhm.
It costs many times more money than doing it. So adopting that is enabling me to do organic architecture, freeform architecture.
And also, we're at the World Out Concrete, but I think you made the point that there is concrete being used in this 3D printing, but there's so many additives in it.
Yeah.
It's hardly concrete anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that we to define it either as a mortar or as a concrete or cementing. It's definitely got cement, but the percentage is fairly, low in comparison to other materials that make it happen. Because essentially, it takes 1 minute for the printer head to loop around to the same spot it was last there, and it should be firm enough to be able to carry the next layer.
Right.
So obviously, you can't just do that with a standard concrete, and it
No.
can't be just. So it has to be water retention, it has to be plasticity, it has to have fibers, it has to have all sorts of things in there to make it work.
A lot more stuff, yeah. Not that there isn't a lot to think about anyway,
Yeah,
but then there's
yeah.
even more to think about.
Correct.
And so, what does this form give you in terms that others don't? Because I've seen. I live in Vancouver. I've seen stuff done with wood that I still can't believe, even though I'm staring at it.
Yeah.
But this is a whole other level of that.
Yeah, it is. So what we're trying to do is to really. Okay, so there's two levels to doing any type of creative architecture. Obviously, the forms that depart from the ground up, and then the things that will shelter you from elements.
Right.
So these two together, it's always a separate system in the normal structure, and all even in the other forms. But like let's just mention Antonio Gaudí. When he designed his buildings, he designed it upside down, right? So you can bring to the gravity aspects, and everything came to a point, and it prevented from any kind of water penetration, things like that. So in this case, naturally, the 3D printing medium is not suitable for roofing materials and things like that yet. However, we're trying to do research on how we can recycle other materials such as plastics and things like that into preforming the unit, and then coming back and printing on that.
Okay.
So this is like sort of the future take, and research is being done around this a lot. There's a lot of people coming to play because we have tons and tons of plastics and other things that are wasted. So those are one of the first things that we look for, is that how do we unite the wall system into the roof system, and this is the hardest part. The other part is high performance. Like when you're coming to a certain angle where you're defying the gravity, how do you support that system? At this point we slow down the pump, we increase certain materials, and then we go less layers, so each layer kind of gets built up. So it's a little bit tricky.
One of the things in the Q&A back and forth was somebody was talking about how it can be used for sort of standardized, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but standard homes, that kind of thing, which there's a demand for, obviously.
Sure.
But it sounds like you're coming at it from a different angle, of things that are almost unique or in that realm.
Yes. Well, so I have two businesses in a sense. We have accessory dwelling unit business, which California approved for sort of extra housing potential. So you can build a house in your backyard.
Right.
That is a separate address. It has all the amenities.
Similar to Canada.
So what we do is we build those things. Now, in terms of affordability, she posed a really the researcher on that side. She posed a really good question or a comment. Is it affordable? I don't think so. Not yet. Yeah, because I have framers that could literally frame a house in less than a week.
Right.
Like I'm talking about a massive house, 2,400 square feet. So can we compare that? No. But the potential to become affordable, yes. The other part of affordability in that sense is more time, because you can visualize things faster, and within 1 week you can actually print. Average home, 1,500 square feet. All the walls could be up if nothing goes wrong. So that is pretty quick, and that in that sense you have the outer wall, the inner wall all done. You could literally paint it. It's okay.
Right.
And you can't do that with the standard construction. So people sometimes define affordability in different ways. Time is also money. So if you can have somebody occupy that house, 5 months, 6 months earlier, that becomes a factor into the affordability.
Another thing that was mentioned was that you run into resistance from engineers and others. And because you'll come up with this form, and then they'll go, what if there's an earthquake? What if there's all these different, let's say, for sake of argument, California arguments. But how do you deal with that at the design stage?
Okay, so what we have to do first is establish those load-bearing points. and then have a very close contact and collaboration with the engineering team. And it could be more than one, because sometimes you have the mechanical engineers, you have the electrical, because if a building is complicated, you have to get these people involved to make it work.
Yeah.
And then structural engineer is the main one that's going to say, I feel that this is going to be okay, right? So the collaboration from the very get-go versus what we do now. For instance, I come in, I do our concept, get it approved by the client, we get it approved by the planning department, then we go to the engineering and says, this is what I got.
Right.
Please go ahead and put your stamp and all that stuff. So in that sense, an immediate collaboration with the engineer, consultation, collaboration, feedback, and stuff like that, and try to make them feel comfortable that this is going to be a doable project, and that we're willing to make it happen if we have to adjust the form a bit if they're not feeling comfortable in the calculations. And again, something that Rick said, that we can't give all the control to the engineers because nothing will be nice looking.
Right.
Although there are exceptions to the rule always, but I'm saying in general there'll be a lot of very conservative approach to building solutions. So we just have to collaborate, hold hands, and kind of like nurture the project up from the ground up.
Do you see 3D printing is so new, but do you see progress happening already in terms of sort of that collaboration?
Huge. Well, for my part, as I'm starting to do projects, I found that this was the most efficient and effective manner to push forward. I know other designers are struggling because they'll get to this point possibly.
Right.
I know some have already gotten there. Because these buildings have been going up since like 2017 in bulk, and before that a number. But I think this is going to be the deal.
Just out of curiosity, in the architecture space, I know as a writer, when I see ChatGPT, I'm like, no, thank you. Is there any resistance within architecture to this kind of stuff?
Well, so here's the style of architecture that I do actually resembles to a lot of what AI produces now.
Right. Okay.
But I was doing this stuff in the early 90s, So it is a problem in a sense that a lot of lazier designers, and I've seen this, and I can say this comfortably, that they adopt the AI system. They also adopt the parametric or mathematical approach to design. So essentially, you have a form, then you elevate the form up into the 3D medium, then you come back with your grasshoppers and another calculating methodology, and you twist the shape, and you have certain textures. And to me, that's not design. I mean, of course, it's design in one sense, but it's elementary because you didn't do it. But for us, being trained in the world of organic architecture, Frank Wright and his students, I'm myself am keen on saying, look, houses, it needs to be derived from the ground up. It needs to take all aspects into consideration, not just a cake decoration deal. So make it feel the momentum, make it feel the movement from the point of entry and exit, from the point of rest and awakening. Right, so you have to take all that into consideration. Temperature changes, and visual experiences, because sometimes you can overwhelm somebody.
Right.
But even the standard structure is underwhelming. Like you're used to these living in these boxes. But it's very comfortable. Of course, the boxes could be it has excelled to a point that is super attractive. Right. But it's because we are super used to it. It doesn't mean that it is the mean. So I think what the researcher was saying is that it's time that we say, hey, we are going to explore architecture, true architecture, and the elevation for us needs to happen, and the planning and building departments needs to take the back seat on that movement. Okay. They should help, not get in the way. Because I tell you something, I actually had this discussion with one planner recently. So I went over the counter and showed this very beautiful building that is highly efficient. It can probably resist a 10-point Richter scale because it is independent of the ground. It's a floating system.
Okay, yeah.
So the Earth could do this and it'll stay intact. It's like a car almost, right? Unibody.
Right.
Yeah. So I said, all right, do you think it's okay for us to build this here in this neighborhood, in the side of the house? He says, no, because it needs to conform to the look and feel of the existing houses.
Yeah, okay.
And I said, wait a minute, this house was built in 1960. We're in 2024. Now, as an architect, I find it insulting. I mean, the reason I didn't get a license because I want to tie myself into it. I'm a general designer. So I design products, I design transportation, machines, whatever. And then I said, look, I enjoy the form. I want the form to be as aggressive as everything else. We have Teslas that drive themselves. We have iPhones that literally listen to you and do things for you. There's so many aspects. We have these Boston Dynamics robots. You can kick it and it stands up.
Right.
So if we're moving in everything in that direction, why is the house being stalemated? And kind of like, they got an anchor very heavy, and it's every single building department across the country.
And if people want to see your designs, which I'm pretty sure they will after listening to this, where should they go to find them?
So it would be at kaneshkadesign.com.
Okay.
Yeah. And then also I started a company called Constra 3D, which will be fully developing machines and doing buildings and 3D printed.
Okay, thanks for joining us.
I really appreciate you.